At my son's birthday, my daughter-in-law handed me a slice of cake and said, "This is your share of his life." I ate it quietly. But what I left on their porch the next morning made her scream. The cake was vanilla with buttercream frosting. Michael's favorite since he was 7. I remember baking that same cake for 33 consecutive birthdays, even during his college years when I'd drive 3 hours just to surprise him. But this year, for his 40th, Amanda had ordered it from some fancy bakery in town. It was beautiful, I'll give her that. 3 tiers of elegant simplicity, with 40 years of Michael, written in perfect script across the middle layer. I sat in the corner of their expansive living room, watching as Amanda orchestrated the perfect party. Their friends mingled. Crystal. Glasses of champagne catching the light from the expensive chandelier I'd never seen before. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. My grandson Jake played with cousins on Amanda's side of the family, while her parents held court near the fireplace, receiving guests like royalty. "Time for cake, everyone," Amanda called out, her voice musical as always. She was beautiful in that intimidating way. Perfectly highlighted blonde hair, not a wrinkle on her face at 43. I smoothed down my simple navy dress and touched my silver hair self-consciously. Everyone gathered around the dining table as Michael blew out the candles and Amanda began slicing the cake. Large, generous pieces were distributed on china plates. For her parents, for their friends, for colleagues I didn't recognize. Then Amanda approached me, holding a plate with what could only be described as a sliver. "This is your share of his life," she said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged, but mostly there were snickers and knowing looks. I took the plate, hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, dear," I managed to say. Michael was across the room, laughing with Amanda's brother, oblivious to what had just happened. Or perhaps not oblivious, perhaps choosing not to see. I ate the small piece slowly, savoring each bite as if it really was all I deserved of my son's life, as if the 35 years I'd spent raising him alone after his father's sudden death counted for nothing. As if the 3 jobs I'd worked to put him through college were insignificant. As if the countless nights I'd stayed up with him during asthma attacks, or helped with science projects, or drove him to baseball practices at dawn had been erased from memory. "Eleanor, you're not in this one. Could you move aside?" Amanda's voice cut through my thoughts. She was arranging a family photo, and apparently I was in the way rather than in the frame. I stepped back, watching as they posed. Michael, Amanda, Jake, and Amanda's parents all smiling widely. No one asked where I should stand. No one seemed to notice I wasn't there. Later, as presents were being opened, I watched Michael unwrap the expensive watch from Amanda's parents with enormous enthusiasm. When he opened my gift, a hand-knitted sweater and a first edition copy of his favorite childhood book that had taken me months to find, he barely glanced at it. "Thanks, Mom," he said, already reaching for the next gift. This wasn't new. This pattern of gradual exclusion had been happening for years, since shortly after he and Amanda married 15 years ago. At first it was subtle. Phone calls returned a little less frequently, invitations to dinner becoming rarer. Then, Jake was born, and I thought things might change. I was eager to be a doting grandmother, to help in any way I could, but Amanda had other ideas. "We have a system, Eleanor," she'd say when I'd offer to babysit. It would disrupt Jake's routine. Soon, I was lucky to see my grandson once a month, always under Amanda's watchful eye. Never alone, never given the chance to build the kind of relationship I'd dreamed of. The kind my own mother had had with Michael. After the party, I drove home to my empty house, the same 4-bedroom home where I'd raised Michael, now feeling cavernous in my solitude. I hung my purse on the hook by the door, slipped off my shoes, and finally let the tears come. On my refrigerator was a calendar, nearly empty of appointments or events. The stark contrast to the busy schedule when Michael was growing up was painful. My finger traced the date of my upcoming birthday next month. No plans, as usual. Last year, Michael had sent a text message 3 days late. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, where a pile of photo albums caught my eye. I pulled one toward me, Michael's high school years. Page after page of a smiling boy becoming a young man. Soccer games I never missed, science fairs where I'd cheered the loudest, prom pictures where I'd proudly fixed his tie. What had happened to that boy? When had he started seeing me through Amanda's eyes instead of his own? The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The sting of Amanda's words and that tiny slice of cake had crystallized something in me. I was tired of being erased, of being made to feel like an imposition in my son's life rather than an integral part of it. I walked to the spare bedroom, which had once been Michael's. The closet still held boxes of his childhood memorabilia that I'd saved meticulously. School projects, sports trophies, report cards, the tooth fairy notes, birthday cards he'd made for me with crayon and construction paper. For hours, I sorted through these tangible pieces of our shared history, these proofs of a relationship that couldn't be rewritten, despite Amanda's best efforts. I found the Mother's Day card he'd written when he was 10 after his father died. "You're the best mom and dad anyone could ask for." By evening, I had compiled it all into a large wooden chest that had belonged to my grandmother. On top, I placed a letter. Not angry, not accusatory, just honest, about how it felt to be slowly erased from my son's life, about the things I had saved and cherished, about my decision to stop accepting scraps of affection when I deserved a full plate. That night, I barely slept. At dawn, I loaded the chest into my car and drove to Michael and Amanda's house. They wouldn't be awake yet. Amanda wasn't an early riser, and Sunday was their lazy day. I placed the chest on their front porch, right by the door where it couldn't be missed. Then I drove away, not looking back, feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't prepared for what came next. I wasn't prepared for the barrage of text messages and missed calls that lit up my phone by mid-morning. Amanda's name appeared most frequently, followed by Michael's. I silenced my phone and placed it face down on the kitchen counter. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to respond to them. Instead, I made myself a proper breakfast: eggs, toast, and coffee that I sipped slowly on my back porch, listening to birdsong instead of excuses. The messages would be predictable. Anyway, Amanda would be furious about the inappropriate display. Michael would be caught in the middle, trying to placate both his wife and his mother, never really taking a stand. This pattern had established itself so long ago that I hardly remembered when it began. Perhaps it was at their wedding, 15, years earlier, when Amanda insisted on seating me at a back table, far from the wedding party, with distant relatives I barely knew. "It's just more balanced this way," Michael had explained, unable to meet my eyes. "Amanda's parents are divorced and remarried, so there are more of them to arrange." Or maybe it was when I first held newborn Jake in the hospital, and Amanda quickly took him back, saying he needs to establish a proper attachment with his mother first, as if I might somehow interfere with their bond, as if my desire to love my grandson was a threat. Over the years, the invitations to their home dwindled. My offers to help were declined. Photos of family gatherings I hadn't been invited to appeared on social media. In each one, Michael looked happy, and I wondered if he ever noticed my absence. Last Thanksgiving, when I had finally been included in a family dinner at their house, I overheard Amanda talking to her sister in the kitchen. "It's exhausting having Eleanor here," she had said. "She's so needy, always wanting Michael's attention. Honestly, I think she's emotionally unstable. You know how these widows get. They pour everything into their children and then can't let go." Her sister had murmured something sympathetic, and I had quietly retreated from the doorway, the words cutting deeper than any knife. Was that really how she saw me? Was that what she had been telling people for years? More importantly, was that what she had convinced Michael to believe? The relentless buzzing of my phone pulled me back to the present. With a sigh, I picked it up. 23 missed calls and 38 text messages. I scrolled through a few. Amanda: "What the hell, Eleanor? This is completely inappropriate. Come get this junk right now." Michael: "Mom, what's going on? Amanda's really upset. Please call me." Amanda: "I always knew you were manipulative, but this is a new low. Michael is devastated." I doubted that. Michael hadn't seemed devastated by anything concerning me in years. If he had been, he might have noticed how his wife systematically pushed me to the margins of his life. My finger hesitated over the call button. For 15 years, I had been the one to smooth things over, to apologize for taking up space, to accept whatever crumbs of attention my son offered me. Not today. Instead, I texted Michael: "I thought you might want Jake to know who his father was as a child. Those aren't junk. They're your history. Do with them what you will." Then I turned off my phone completely. The house felt different somehow. Quieter, but not in the lonely way I had grown accustomed to. There was peace in the silence, in not waiting for a call that might never come. I walked through the rooms that had witnessed 35 years of my life as a mother, the kitchen where I'd taught Michael to make pancakes, the living room where we'd built pillow forts during thunderstorms that scared him, the backyard where he'd practiced pitching for hours, determined to make the high school baseball team. This house held so many memories, but it had also become a mausoleum of sorts. I had kept everything exactly as it was when Michael lived here, as if preserving the space might somehow preserve our relationship. But our relationship had changed long ago, and no amount of preserved memories could bring back what we had lost. That afternoon, I did something I'd been considering for years but had never found the courage to do. I called a real estate agent. "I'd like to discuss selling my house," I told the friendly-sounding woman who answered. "Of course. I'm Sarah. When would you like to meet? Is tomorrow too soon?" Sarah laughed. "Not at all. I have an opening at 10 a.m. if that works for you." "Perfect," I said, surprising myself with how right this felt. After the call, I turned my phone back on, bracing myself for the onslaught of notifications. There were even more messages now, growing increasingly frantic. Michael. "Mom, please. Call me. I don't understand what's going on." Amanda. "Your behavior is exactly why we've had to limit your involvement. You're unstable." I sighed. There it was. The narrative Amanda had crafted about me, now explicitly stated. In her version of reality, I wasn't a woman who had devoted her life to raising her son alone. I was unstable, problematic, a burden to be managed rather than a person to be loved. A new message appeared as I held the phone. "Michael, I'm coming over. We need to talk." My heart jumped. My son was coming here, something that had happened maybe twice in the past year, but I didn't want to talk yet. I wasn't ready to hear more justifications, more gentle letdowns, more explanations of why Amanda's feelings mattered more than mine. I quickly texted back, "I'm not home, out with friends." A small lie, but also a promise to myself. I would make it true. I would build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for Michael's attention. A life with friends, with purpose, with joy, that didn't depend on whether my son remembered my birthday. I scrolled through my contacts, landing on a name I hadn't called in too long, Patricia. We had been close friends when our children were in school together, but had drifted apart as I increasingly isolated myself, ashamed of my diminishing role in Michael's life. Patricia answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, it's been ages." "Too long," I agreed. "I was wondering if you might be free for dinner tonight." "Let me check with Jim," she said, then returned a moment later. "We'd love to have you. Come at 6. I'm making lasagna." "I'll bring wine," I said, smiling for what felt like the first time in days. As I hung up, I realized I had just taken the first small step toward reclaiming my life. The wooden chest on Michael and Amanda's porch wasn't just a collection of memories. It was me setting down a burden I had carried for too long, the burden of trying to matter to people who had decided I didn't. Tonight, I would have dinner with old friends. Tomorrow, I would start the process of selling the house that had become both a shrine and a prison. And after that, for the first time in 15 years, I felt a flutter of excitement about the endless possibilities that awaited me. My phone buzzed again with Michael's name. I turned it off and placed it in a drawer. Whatever he had to say could wait. For once, I wasn't going to drop everything for the chance at a moment of his attention. I had given Michael roots. Now it was time to give myself wings. The Silent Gift, Chapter 3. The inventory of absences. Dinner with Patricia and Jim was like stepping into a warm bath after years in the cold. Their home was modest but filled with laughter, photos of grandchildren they actually saw regularly, and the comforting smell of homemade lasagna. "You look good, Eleanor," Patricia said as she poured me another glass of wine. "Different somehow." I smiled, feeling my shoulders relax. "I'm making some changes." "About time," she said with a knowing look. We had been close enough once that she'd witnessed the early stages of Amanda's campaign to edge me out of Michael's life. "How is Michael?" "Probably angry with me right now," I admitted, then explained about the chest of memories I'd left on their doorstep. Jim let out a low whistle. "Bold move. 15 years too late," I said, "but better than never." Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know, we've missed you at our gatherings. Our book club still meets every other Tuesday. You should join us. For years, I'd declined such invitations, always waiting to be available, in case Michael called or needed me. How many opportunities for connection had I sacrificed for a relationship that existed primarily in my hopes? I'd like that, I said, and meant it. When I returned home that night, the house felt different, less like a shrine to the past, and more like a space I was ready to leave behind. I checked my phone, which I'd left in the drawer. 7 more. Missed calls from Michael, 3 from Amanda. I put it back without listening to the voicemails. The next morning, Sarah, the real estate agent, arrived precisely at 10. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 40s with a no-nonsense attitude that I appreciated. "It's a beautiful home," she said, walking through the rooms with a professional eye. "Great bones, good neighborhood. When are you looking to move?" "As soon as possible," I replied. She raised an eyebrow. "Any particular reason for the rush?" I considered giving a polite, generic answer, but something about Sarah's direct manner invited honesty. "I've been living in the past for too long," I said. "It's time to build a future." She nodded, seeming to understand more than I had said. "I have a client who's been looking for exactly this kind of property. They might be willing to make an offer quickly, possibly even cash. Would you be open to showing the house tomorrow?" My heart raced. This was happening faster than I'd anticipated, but it felt right. Yes, that would be fine. After Sarah left, I began the daunting task of sorting through 35 years of accumulated life. What would I keep? What would I let go? The questions felt both practical and metaphorical. I was in the attic, going through boxes of old Christmas decorations, when I heard the front door open. "Mom?" Michael's voice echoed through the house. I froze. I wasn't ready for this confrontation. Not yet. "Up here?" I called, my voice steadier than I felt. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the ladder to the attic. When he appeared, I was struck by how tired he looked. His hair, now showing threads of silver at the temples, was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "I've been calling you," he said, his voice a mixture of concern and accusation. "I've been busy," I replied, continuing to sort ornaments. He glanced at the open boxes surrounding me. "What are you doing?" "Decluttering. I'm selling the house." His face registered shock. "What? Since when?" "Since yesterday. The real estate agent thinks it could sell quickly." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. He used to do that as a teenager when he was stressed about exams. "Mom, we need to talk about what you did. That chest. Amanda is really upset." Of course, that was his primary concern, Amanda's feelings. "What about you, Michael? Are you upset?" He looked away. It was a lot to process. My old baseball trophies, report cards, all those photos. "Why now?" I set down the ornament I was holding, a clay star he had made in 2nd grade. "When was the last time you invited me to anything important in your life?" He frowned. "That's not fair. We had you over. For Christmas. Christmas, 6 months ago, for 2 hours. We're busy, Mom. Amanda's parents need attention too, and with Jake's activities, I saw on Facebook that Jake had a piano recital last month." I interrupted quietly. "I didn't know he played piano." Michael had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It wasn't a big deal." "And your anniversary dinner at Le Bernardin? Your promotion at work? The family vacation to Maine?" I listed each event I'd discovered through social media or mutual acquaintances, each exclusion that had cut like a knife. "Mom, did you know," I continued, my voice soft but firm, "that Amanda tells people I'm emotionally unstable? That I'm needy? That I'm a burden?" His face flushed. "She doesn't mean—" "Yes, she does. And you let her." I picked up another ornament, a small glass angel. "Do you remember this? You saved up your allowance when you were 11 to buy it for me. Said it reminded you of me because I was always watching over you." He swallowed. "Of course I remember. I've kept everything, Michael. Every card, every gift, every memory. I've kept this house exactly as it was when you lived here, hoping you'd want to share it with your son. But you don't. And that's your choice. So this is... what? Punishment?" I shook my head. "No. It's acceptance. You've made your life with Amanda, and I'm not a significant part of it. That's reality, and it's time I accepted it and built my own life." Michael's expression shifted from defensiveness to something like panic. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Somewhere smaller, somewhere new. He looked around the attic, at the boxes of his childhood I had preserved. What about all this stuff? I've already given you what I thought was important. The rest. The rest. I gestured vaguely. You can take what you want. Anything left behind when I move, I'll donate. Just like that? You're erasing everything? The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. Isn't that what you've been doing to me for years? He had no answer for that. We stood in silence for a long moment, surrounded by the physical artifacts of a relationship that had become increasingly intangible. I should go, he finally said. Amanda is waiting. Of course she was. Goodbye, Michael. He hesitated at the top of the ladder, looking like he wanted to say something more. But in the end, he just nodded and disappeared down the steps. I heard the front door close a minute later. I sat among the boxes, turning the angel ornament in my hands. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the painful truth. The son I had raised, the boy who had saved up for this angel, existed now only in my memories. The man who had just left was a stranger who had learned to see me through his wife's eyes, and I was finally ready to see myself through my own. Sarah called the next morning with unexpected news. Eleanor, we have a cash offer on your house. Full asking price, flexible closing date. I nearly dropped my coffee. Already? But we haven't even had an official showing. My clients drove by yesterday. They're relocating from Chicago and need to move quickly. They love the neighborhood and exterior of your home. She paused. It's unusual, but it's a solid offer. I glanced around my kitchen, where decades of family meals and late-night conversations with Michael had taken place. This house had been my anchor when my husband died, the one constant in my life as a single mother. But now it felt like an anchor in another sense, weighing me down, keeping me moored to a past that no longer existed. I'll take it, I said, firmly. After hanging up, I typed a message to Michael. I've accepted an offer on the house, closing in 30 days. His response came immediately. What? Mom, you can't be serious. I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. 10 minutes later, Amanda called, something she rarely did, preferring to let Michael handle his troublesome mother. Against my better judgment, I answered. Eleanor, she began, voice tight with forced politeness, don't you think this is all a bit dramatic? No, I don't. It's practical. The house is too big for me. But where will you go? Have you even thought this through? I recognized the panic beneath her concern. The family home, a potential inheritance Michael had undoubtedly assumed, would eventually be his, was slipping away. I'm looking at apartments in Lakeside Village, I said, naming a modern senior living community. A retirement home? Amanda sounded horrified. Eleanor, you're only 65. It's not a nursing home, Amanda. It's independent living with art studios, a swimming pool, and organized trips. I toured it yesterday and put down a deposit. Without consulting us? The polite veneer cracked. These decisions affect all of us. I almost laughed. Amanda, when was the last time either of you consulted me about decisions that affected me? When you scheduled family vacations during my birthday? When you excluded me from Jake's recitals? Silence. Then, you're being incredibly unfair. No, I said quietly. I'm finally being fair to myself. I ended the call, feeling strangely light. For years, I had tiptoed around Amanda's feelings, accepted her narrative about my place in the family. No more. That afternoon, I attended my first book club meeting with Patricia and her friends. The women, most around my age, welcomed me warmly. Eleanor used to be a talented painter, Patricia told the group. She had a piece in the community art show years ago that was absolutely stunning. I felt my cheeks warm. That was a lifetime ago. You should take it up again, suggested Diane, a retired art teacher. We have a small group that meets at the community center on Thursdays. Just a few old ladies splashing paint around and drinking too much wine. It sounds wonderful, I said, meaning it. On my way home, I drove past Lakeside Village, its modern buildings gleaming in the sun. My future home, a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor with a balcony overlooking the lake. In 30 days, I would wake up to that view instead of the walls that had witnessed my slow erasure from my son's life. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Michael's car. He was sitting on the porch steps, waiting. How long have you been here? I asked. About an hour. He stood. Mom, we need to talk about this house situation. Inside, Michael surveyed the living room. Several boxes were already packed, and empty spaces on the walls showed where I'd removed family photos. "You're really doing this," he said accusingly. "Yes." "Why? Because Amanda and I hurt your feelings? This seems extreme." I took my time before answering. "This isn't about hurt feelings, Michael. It's about recognizing reality and making choices that are right for me." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've spent 15 years accommodating a relationship where I'm barely tolerated, where I'm expected to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you and Amanda decide to throw my way." His face flushed. "That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you thought about me when making family plans? When was the last time you stood up to Amanda when she excluded me?" He looked away. "It's complicated. Yes, it is. And I've finally realized that I can't fix it. I can only change how I respond to it." Michael stopped at the mantel where a photo of him and Jake used to sit. "So you're just giving up on us?" "No. I'm giving up on the fantasy that things will change. I'm building a life that makes me happy rather than waiting for you to remember I exist." He turned, looking genuinely distressed. "Mom, I love you. You know that." His words pierced my heart. "I know you think you do, but love isn't just a feeling, Michael. It's actions. It's presence. It's making space in your life for someone." For the first time, I saw something like real understanding in his eyes. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it and sighed. "Amanda?" I guessed. He nodded. "She's waiting for me." "Of course she was. Go," I said gently. "She's your priority." "Mom." "It's okay, Michael. I understand now. And I'm going to be okay." He hesitated, then moved toward the door. "We'll talk more about this later," but I knew we wouldn't. Not really. The conversation would be about my hasty decision, about how I was making things difficult. It wouldn't be about the years of exclusion, the slow erosion of my place in his life. And for the first time, I was okay with that. I had spent enough years trying to be heard by someone who wasn't really listening. As the door closed behind him, I looked around at the half-packed boxes. In 30 days, this chapter of my life would be over, and a new one I was writing for myself, would begin. The days blurred together as I packed up 35 years of life. Each object required a decision: keep, donate, discard. But the hardest decisions weren't about furniture or kitchenware. They were about memories. Michael's elementary school art projects, the Mother's Day cards with crayon hearts and wobbly handwriting, photographs of birthday parties, graduations, the day he brought Jake home from the hospital. These were the items that stopped me mid-pack, each one like a small stone in my heart. I had been sorting through the garage when I found the wooden chest. My grandmother had given it to me on my wedding day, an antique hope chest passed down through generations of women in our family. I had always assumed I would one day give it to Michael's wife, but Amanda had dismissed it when I'd offered it years ago. "It's not really our aesthetic," she'd said with a thin smile. "Too old-fashioned." I ran my fingers over the carved surface, remembering my grandmother's hands doing the same. Inside, it was empty, waiting to be filled. An idea began to form in my mind. The next day, I met with the lawyers to update my will. The house would no longer be part of my estate, and I needed to make other changes too. "Ms. Crawford," the young lawyer said, scanning the documents I'd requested, "are you certain about these amendments?" "Completely," I replied. "And your son? He's aware of your decisions?" "He will be." That evening, I began filling the wooden chest. Not with all of Michael's childhood mementos. Those had already gone to him in that first chest I'd left on his doorstep. This chest would contain something else entirely. I worked on it every night for a week. During the days, I continued packing, visited Lakeside Village to select paint colors for my new apartment, and attended my first painting class with Diane and the other old ladies splashing paint around. I hadn't held a paintbrush in over 20 years, but my hands remembered. The simple still life I created wasn't remarkable, but the act of painting itself, the focus, the flow of time, the satisfaction of creation, was like rediscovering a part of myself I had forgotten existed. "You haven't lost your touch," Diane said, examining my canvas. I smiled. "It feels good, like finding an old friend." "Bring this to your new place," she suggested. "It's a good reminder of new beginnings." 2 weeks before my closing date, I received a text from Michael. "Mom, we need to discuss the will situation. Amanda is upset." Of course she was. I could imagine the scene when they learned that I'd restructured my estate. Most of my assets would now go directly to Jake when he turned 25, with a smaller portion set aside for Michael. Nothing for Amanda. I didn't respond to the text. 3 days later, another message. Mom, this is serious. We need to talk. Again, I didn't reply. There was nothing to discuss. The day before closing, I finished packing the last of my belongings. The moving company would come tomorrow to take everything to Lakeside Village. The house looked strange, empty of furniture, but somehow full of ghosts. I sat on the floor of the living room, the wooden chest beside me. Inside were photographs, letters, and a journal I'd been writing for the past 3 weeks. A different kind of memory box than the one I'd left for Michael earlier. This one wasn't about his childhood. It was about mine. Photographs of me before. I was a mother, traveling through Europe after college, painting in my studio apartment, laughing with friends at concerts and cafes, letters from my grandmother, full of wisdom about independence and self-worth, journal entries about my dreams, my disappointments, my quiet joys, and pages about my marriage, the good years before cancer took my husband too young. About how I'd learned to be both mother and father to Michael. About my pride in him, and also my heartbreak at how he had allowed himself to be separated from me. Finally, there was a letter to Jake. Not a bitter one, not a complaint about his parents, but an invitation to know me as a person, not just as the grandmother kept at the edges of his life. I told him about my love of painting, my favorite books, the time I'd hiked the Grand Canyon in my 20s. I told him there would always be a place for him in my life, whenever he wanted it. On top of everything, I placed the painting I'd done in class, not the still life, but another one I'd worked on privately. It showed a woman standing at the edge of a lake, her face turned toward the rising sun. Her posture was one of quiet strength, of anticipation. I sealed the chest with a small brass key, which I tucked into the envelope containing my new will. The doorbell rang precisely at 7 that evening. I knew who it would be before I opened the door. Mom. Michael stood on the porch, looking tired and frustrated. Why haven't you been answering my calls? I stepped aside to let him in. I've been busy packing. He entered, looking around at the empty house. So you're really going through with this? The movers come tomorrow morning. He ran a hand through his hair. And the will? The lawyer called me, said I should talk to you. Would you like some tea? I asked, ignoring his question. I still have the kettle out. I don't want tea, Mom. I want to understand what you're doing. I moved to the kitchen anyway, filling the kettle and setting it on the stove. Michael followed, leaning against the doorframe. Are you punishing us? He asked. Is that what this is about? I turned to face him. No, Michael, this isn't about punishment. It's about clarity. Clarity? He laughed without humor. You've cut Amanda out of your will completely. You're selling the family home without discussion, and you're moving into a senior community at 65. None of that seems clear to me. That's because you're looking at it from your perspective, I said gently. Not mine. The kettle whistled. I poured hot water over a single tea bag in my favorite mug, one of the few things I hadn't packed. Yet, then explain it to me, he said, his voice softer now. Help me understand. I gestured to the empty kitchen. Let's sit. We sat on the floor, backs against the cabinets, like we used to do sometimes when he was a teenager and wanted to talk about something important. For 15 years, I began, I've been living in a kind of limbo. Not fully part of your life, but not fully separate from it either. Just waiting, hoping, making myself available for whenever you might want me around. He started to protest, but I held up a hand. It's okay, Michael. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because it's the truth, and I've decided I don't want to live like that anymore. So you're cutting ties? I shook my head. No, I'm establishing boundaries. I'm creating a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for your attention. The will, the house, Lakeside Village, they're all part of that. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Amanda thinks you hate her. I don't hate Amanda, I said truthfully. But I don't like how she's treated me, or how you've allowed it. He flinched at that, but didn't deny it. There's something else I need to tell you, I said. I've made a memory chest for Jake, not now, for his 25th birthday. It has things in it that I want him to know about me, about our family, things he might not otherwise learn. Michael's eyes widened slightly. What kinds of things? The truth, I said simply. Not a version meant to hurt anyone, but not a sanitized one either. He looked at me for a long moment, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. You've changed. Yes, I agreed. I have. We sat in silence as I sipped my tea, the empty house quiet around us. "I should go," he finally said, standing. "Amanda's waiting." Of course she was. "Goodbye, Michael," I said, not rising from my spot on the floor. "I'll let you know when I'm settled at Lakeside." He hesitated, then nodded and walked away. I heard the front door close softly behind him. I finished my tea in the empty kitchen, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and peace. Tomorrow, I would leave this house for the last time, leave behind the walls that had contained my waiting, my hoping, my gradual diminishment, and I would take with me only what I needed for the life I was now choosing. 6 months passed quickly in my new life at Lakeside Village. My apartment, with its view of the water and morning sunlight, felt more like home than the house had in years. I filled it with only what I loved: my grandmother's rocking chair, books that brought me joy, and most importantly, my paintings. The art studio at Lakeside had become my sanctuary. After that first class with Diane, I had joined the Thursday group permanently. Now my days had rhythm: morning coffee on the balcony, painting in the afternoon, book club on Tuesdays, occasional dinners with Patricia and Jim, weekend excursions to museums and theaters with new friends. I spoke to Michael occasionally, brief, polite phone calls where we discussed the weather and how Jake was doing in school. He never mentioned Amanda, and I never asked. It was a fragile peace, but it was peace nonetheless. Then one Saturday morning in October, as I was setting up my easel by the lake, my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. "Hello?" I answered, expecting another short, superficial conversation. "Mom?" His voice sounded different, strained. "Can we talk in person?" I paused, brush in hand. "Is everything all right?" "Yes." "No." "I don't know." He took a deep breath. "It's complicated." A phrase I'd heard from him many times before, but this time it didn't sound like an excuse. "I'm painting by the lake at Lakeside," I said. "You're welcome to join me. I'll be there in 30 minutes. True to his word, Michael appeared half an hour later. He looked disheveled, his hair uncombed, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of his usual business casual attire. He spotted me and walked over, his steps hesitant. "Mom," he said, eyes widening as he took in my canvas. "A landscape of the lake at dawn. This is really good." "Thank you," I replied, setting down my brush. "I've been practicing." He gestured to the bench beside my easel. "May I?" I nodded, and he sat, staring out at the water for a long moment before speaking. "Amanda?" "Moved out 3 weeks ago." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart quickened. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you?" He glanced at me, a hint of the old defensiveness in his tone. "Yes, Michael. I don't wish unhappiness on either of you, regardless of how I've been treated." He looked away, shoulders slumping. "She's been unhappy for a long time, apparently. Said I'm too focused on work, not attentive enough." A bitter laugh escaped him. Ironic, considering how much time I spent trying to please her. I remained silent, letting him speak. "After you moved, things changed. I started seeing patterns. The way she controlled who we spent time with, when we saw family, her comments about my friends, my interests." He ran a hand through his hair. "And Jake, she's been so strict with him, micromanaging everything. Like she did with me, I guess." "What happened 3 weeks ago?" I asked gently. "I found Jake crying in his room. He'd been invited to a sleepover at his best friend's house, but Amanda said no because she didn't like the parents. When I questioned her decision, she accused me of undermining her authority." He shook his head. "Jake told me later that he's never allowed to visit friends' houses, that Amanda always has an excuse." My heart ached for Jake, but I kept listening. It was like a switch flipped. I suddenly saw what you must have seen all these years, how she isolated us, controlled everything. He looked at me directly. "Including how much time I spent with you." The admission hung in the air between us. I told her things needed to change. She packed a bag the next day. Michael sighed. "She's staying with her sister while we figure things out. And Jake, he's with me. He's happier, more relaxed." Michael smiled slightly. "We've been doing things together, actually talking." I nodded, dipping my brush in water and cleaning it carefully. "I'm glad." "Mom," Michael said, his voice cracking slightly. "I've been thinking about that chest you left for Jake's 25th birthday." I set the brush down, giving him my full attention. "I don't want him to have to wait that long to know you, to know our family's real story." I studied my son's face, the face I had loved since the moment I first held him, through all the years of closeness and distance. "What are you saying?" "Michael," I'm saying. He took a deep breath. I'd like Jake to spend more time with you. More time with you. If you're willing. And I'd like to try to rebuild what we've lost. I didn't respond immediately. The hope in his eyes was painfully familiar. How many times had I looked at him with that same expression, wishing for connection? Michael, I said carefully, I would love to have a relationship with Jake, but I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person who waited by the phone for your calls, who accepted whatever small role you and Amanda assigned me. He nodded. I know, that's actually why I'm here. The woman who left that chest on my porch, who stood up to Amanda, who built this new life, that's the grandmother I want Jake to know. I felt tears prick at my eyes. And what about us? You and me? I don't know if we can go back to what we were before Amanda, he admitted. But maybe we can build something new. Something honest. I considered his words, weighing them against the hurt of the past 15 years. I'd like that, but it won't happen overnight, Michael. Trust takes time to rebuild. I understand. He hesitated, then asked, would you come to dinner next weekend? At my house, just me and Jake. He's been asking about you. The invitation, so simple, yet so meaningful, hung in the air between us. Yes, I said finally. I'd like that. Michael smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Thank you. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunlight play across the lake. Your paintings, Michael said eventually. They're beautiful. I didn't know you were so talented. There's a lot about me you don't know, I replied without bitterness. But perhaps you'll learn. He nodded, looking thoughtful. I should go. Jake has soccer practice. As he stood to leave, he hesitated, then leaned down and hugged me. Real hug. Not the perfunctory embrace he'd given me at obligatory family gatherings over the years. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered, for all of it. I hugged him back, allowing myself to feel both the pain of what had been lost and the possibility of what might be rebuilt. I know, I said simply. I watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller against the backdrop of the lake. Then I turned back to my canvas, adding touches of gold to the sunrise I was painting. The following Saturday, I stood outside Michael's house, a freshly baked apple pie in my hands, Jake's favorite, according to Michael. I rang the doorbell, feeling a flutter of nerves. The door opened to reveal a lanky boy with Michael's eyes and a hesitant smile. Grandma Eleanor? Hello, Jake, I said warmly. Dad's burning the lasagna, he confided in a stage whisper. He said not to tell you. I laughed, a real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. Your secret's safe with me. Beyond Jake, I could see Michael in the kitchen, frantically waving away smoke from the oven. The scene was so ordinary, so human, so different from the perfect, controlled gatherings at Amanda's immaculate house. Come in, Jake said, holding the door wide. Dad said you're an artist now. Will you teach me how to paint sometime? I'd love to, I replied, stepping across the threshold into what felt like the beginning of something new. Not a perfect restoration of what was lost, not a fairy tale ending where all hurts were magically healed, but a beginning, nonetheless. And for now, that was enough.